Okay, so this is the map of the talk. If I had to define a general field of study to which these two papers belong, I would say that they are about the macroeconomics of international migration, which means different things. So the measurement, the assessment of aggregate migration stocks and flows, but also the macro analysis of the determinants and the consequences of migration. So first, the macroeconomics of international migration is a very broad and complex area of study. It's broad because when you deal with migration, you can study immigration, so in migration, or emigration of migration. You can study the determinants of migration or the implications for the countries involved. And when you deal with the consequences, migration has to do with labor market issues, with public finance issues, with growth and development issues, even sociological, political issues. So it's a very broad area of research. So when you have good data, you can study how migration impacts sending and receiving countries, and you have a huge literature showing that immigration affects receiving countries through multiple channels. So immigration can affect the capital per worker ratio. You have more workers, and for a fixed level of physical capital, which is a nice assumption in the short run, and at least if physical capital is not perfectly mobile across nations, so it affects the average wage in the economy and the interest rate. Migration affects the skill structure of the labor force, with an impact on wage inequality between college graduates and less educated people. Migration affects public finance. They receive transfers and they pay taxes, so the effect is ambiguous. What's the goal of this paper? Well, we think that it's important to disentangle the volume of migration at the world level by country of origin, country of destination, by gender, by education level. These are 4 maps showing you, illustrating the structure of geographic distribution of immigration and immigration. So the top graphs are about immigration. So on the northwest, you see the immigration to population ratio. The main countries are Canada, Australia, then you have the US, Europe, the Gulf countries, Russia is also important. So the countries sending many college graduates are countries in which the system of education is quite good. So you have basically high-income countries, plus Latin American countries, South African countries, South Africa, and a couple of exceptions. So you see that that the most important countries in terms of immigration are Morocco and Egypt, sending something like 1.5 million adult migrants abroad, and you can multiply that by something between 2 and 3 to have the total number of migrants. Countries like Jordan and Lebanon are sending a high proportion of their labor force, but they are smaller countries, so this is why the number is smaller, but in proportion of the labor force it's important. You see that everywhere, almost everywhere, the ratio emigration to immigration is much bigger than 1. Well, these are just tables giving you more details about that. So you see that we have 100.5 million migrants today, or in 2000. If GCC productivity declines by 10%, GCC will be less attractive, and migration is very sensitive to income in the GCC according to our estimates. So the migration stocks falls by 3%. If African education rises, we could say, okay, Africa will be richer. If Africa is richer, we will have less migrants from Africa. No, because Africa remains a very poor country, and the fact that people have college education means that they can export their human capital more easily, and they will continue to live. So we have more migration if human capital increases in Africa. And these are the results for the MENA countries. So almost all the MENA countries would lose, except countries which have, according to the model, too many migrants, like Lebanon and Yemen. But and in Yemen you have an increase in GDP per capita, but a decrease in GDP per natural, because less migrants are going abroad. But in the other countries you have basically a positive effect, which depends on the size of migration, so it's very heterogeneous. Well, conclusion, 1 minute. So we endogenize migration and economic performance in the same model. We calibrate that model properly on the unique database. We see that migration propagates shock, can be a multiplier or dampening phenomenon. general equilibrium effects are very important if you want to deal with the welfare benefits of migration. And we see that a transition towards an optimal allocation would require lowering the grain rate from the south to the west. And you have so many studies showing that migration interacts with these other propagation mechanisms. You have a literature on the connection between migration and trade, a connection between migration and FDI, the role of migration in technology transfers between countries, even the role of migration in the transfers of behavioral norms, what Michel is going to do, but not only democratic values, but also behavioral norms in terms of fertility, investment in child education, and so on. So we could also introduce that in the model, and having a more complex model in which you have this interdependency between migration and economic variables, but also these other propagation channels in the model. This is something we plan to do in the future. So thank you for your attention.